I'm from West Virginia.
What's that got to do with pink?
You ever notice how the hardest stories to tell are the ones that actually happened? Fiction gives you permission to lie in the right places, to compress time without apologising for it, to let a character exist in a single moment long enough that we actually feel something instead of just registering that we're supposed to. But biopics are haunted by the anxiety of accuracy. They're terrified of leaving anything out, so they end up leaving out the only thing that matters. Time to breathe. This is Frameshift Deep Cut, where we talk about movies like they owe us an explanation for our feelings. Today we're looking at Christy, David Michaud's Sydney Sweeney-led boxing biopic about the life of Christy Martin, a trailblazing fighter who broke into a male-dominated sport in the 90s, became famous, survived brutal domestic abuse and eventually reclaimed her life. It's a story that should devastate you. Instead, it kind of exhausts you. And here's the thing, it's not because the story isn't worth telling, it's because the movie can't stop telling it. Let's talk about the biopic formula, because Christy follows it with the discipline of someone checking off a to-do list. We open with Christy as a young woman in West Virginia, stifled by her conservative parents who are not thrilled about her being a lesbian. She discovers boxing, violence as catharsis, rebellion as sport. She's good, really good. She meets Jim Martin, her trainer, who becomes her manager, then her husband. He's controlling, then abusive, then really abusive. She gets famous, he gets worse. Don King shows up for one scene like a plot device with a cameo budget. Time jumps happen. Years pass. We're told it's been a decade, but it doesn't feel like a decade because we were already moving at freeway speed. Then in 2010, Jim tries to kill her. She survives. Epilogue text tells us she's happy now. Roll credits. It's not that any of this is untrue. It's that it's been flattened into a highlight reel, a Wikipedia page with a soundtrack. Sydney Sweeney is doing everything she can to make you feel Christy Martin's pain, her shame, her desperation, her power. She physically transforms, she trains, she embodies the kind of walled-off vulnerability that comes from being forced to perform toughness while drowning in private terror. She's incredible, and yet the movie keeps yanking her out of scenes just as they start to land, because there's another year to cover, another fight to montage through, another instance of Jim being a sentient pile of red flags. Ben Foster, to his credit, plays Jim Martin as exactly what he is. A mediocre, insecure man who wields control because the world handed him the tools to do so. He's not complicated, he's enabled, and that's the point. But the film doesn't quite know what to do with that point beyond letting him be generically vile for 2 hours. The structure here is the problem. Christy is a montage of montages. Training montage, fight montage, media tour montage, abuse escalation montage. It's like the film is so afraid of being boring that it refuses to let a single moment just sit. And in doing so, it makes the whole thing feel like homework. You know what this reminds me of? Those year in review videos social media apps auto-generate for you. Everything important that happened stitched together in 90 seconds with uplifting music, and somehow it all feels less meaningful than it actually was. Christy believes it's telling the story of a survivor, and it is, but it's telling it in a way that makes survival feel like a plot point instead of a process. The film wants you to admire Christy Martin for breaking barriers, and you do. It wants you to be horrified by Jim's abuse, and you are. It wants you to feel the weight of a woman trapped by homophobia, misogyny, and a culture that refused to see her as anything other than a novelty, and you would if the movie slowed down long enough to let you. But it doesn't, it can't, because it's too busy being a biopic. Here's the frustrating part. There's a version of this movie that works. It's the version that spends 40 minutes in 1995. The version that lets us feel what it's like to be the only woman in a room full of men who see you as a punchline. The version that stays with Christy long enough to watch her realise, slowly, painfully, that the man she married is the same cage she fought so hard to escape. Instead, we get a timeline, a very competent, very well-acted timeline. And look, I'm not saying biopics are easy to make. They're not. Real lives don't have 3-act structures. Real trauma doesn't resolve itself in a tidy second-act low point. But the best biopics, the ones that actually work, find a way to make the life feel lived rather than recounted. Christy recounts. Can we talk about Katy O'Brian for a second? She plays Lisa Holwine, Christy's boxing rival turned love interest, and she lights up every scene she's in. You can feel the chemistry. You can feel the possibility of a life after Jim. A life where Christy gets to be herself, and then the movie just moves on. Lisa becomes a footnote. The epilogue text tells us they ended up together, which, great, but we don't see it. We don't get to watch Christy rebuild. We don't get to feel the relief of freedom after years of suffocation. Instead, the climax is Jim's attack, and then the movie ends. It's like the film is more interested in the trauma than the survival, which is a choice. Here's the thing about biopics in 2025. We've gotten really good at celebrating the performance and really bad at questioning the structure. Sydney Sweeney will and should get awards attention for this. She's done the work. She's become someone else, but the film around her is so dutiful, so determined to cover every base that it forgets to be about anything other than the fact that Christy Martin's life was hard, and it was hard, but hardness alone isn't a story, it's a condition. The question a biopic has to answer isn't what happened, it's what does it mean that this happened, and how do we make you feel that meaning? Christy answers the first question thoroughly. The second one, it leaves on the table. There's a kind of loneliness that comes from being seen but not known. Christy Martin was famous. She was on magazine covers. She made boxing history, and yet she was trapped, not because she was weak, but because the world around her made sure the exits were locked. That's the story here. Not the punches, not the training. The exits, the ones that should have been there and weren't. The people who should have helped and didn't. The systems that should have protected her and couldn't because they were never designed to. Survival isn't a montage. It's slow. It's messy. It's waking up every day and choosing to keep going even when you don't know how the story ends. Christy Martin lived that. The movie just struggles to make you feel it. So here's where we land. Christy is a performance in search of a better film. Sydney Sweeney is doing Oscar-level work. Ben Foster is doing I Really Hate This Guy work, which, to be fair, is the assignment. The story itself is important, and Christy Martin's life deserves to be remembered. But the movie, it's a Wikipedia page with a pulse. It wants to move you, but it's too busy moving through you, and maybe that's the biopic trap. Maybe when you're dealing with a real person's real pain, the instinct is to be respectful, which somehow translates to being distant, to covering everything, but feeling nothing. Christy Martin fought her way out of hell. The least the movie could do is let us sit with her long enough to understand what that cost. If you're into deep cuts, bad structures, and performances that deserved better scripts, you know where to find me. I'll be here, still wishing Katy O'Brian had more screen time.